Guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with these nerds today. We've got Stitch the Alchemist, who actually I should have asked your real name before we started in case you wanted to use that instead.
Uh,
And Nerdarch instead.
Stitch is fine.
You look like a Stitch anyway. That's what I was thinking.
He doesn't. He's not blue. He's not short. Where's the antenna and the extra
They're
arms?
gonna pop out any minute.
Sweet.
So I think you and Ted had a communication somewhere, as it might have even just been in chat, about the fact that you run a lot of games during the week.
That is correct. Yeah.
So how do you define a lot? What do you consider a lot of games?
Well, I average 9 per week, and depending on what week it is, it works its way up anywhere from 10 to 12.
And that's all you running.
That's all with me running. Yes.
Oh my god.
Do you play in any games?
I get to play approximately twice a month. My Wednesday night game, we swap out who's running it.
If that was me, I'd be like, when I got to play, I'd be like, I just want to play a pudding or an ooze, because that's how my brains feel after running that many sessions.
All right. I played 4 days straight. I played the RPG Crate game Friday night. I played Dave's Griffin Gaff game on Saturday night. I played the Dungeon World game Sunday afternoon, and then last night I played the Saver Dice Numenera. I'm exhausted, and I only ran one of those games. I could not imagine, like, what does it take to build up to being able to run that many and to just constantly go, go, go?
Copious amounts of caffeine and an inability to say no.
Mike from Unmade Gaming, he was the DM of the Numenera game last night, and if you guys want to check that out, it's a ongoing thing for the next 11 weeks if we don't all die. But he does a bit of the same thing. He streams like 4 or 5 days a week just off, and then he sometimes plays in person aside from that, and he's the GM, and I'm dumbfounded when I hear these stories. So, like, did you have to build up to something like that? Did you just, yeah, I can handle this, and you just went?
It started with me being overwhelmed with 3 games a week, and it just rapidly accelerated from there, and I had to adapt.
Now, do you do anything else? Is there anything that you do to unplug and decompress the brain?
Man, you think I have any time? No, I have Thursdays are the only day that I'm not doing anything gaming related. So on Thursdays I like to read usually, or just play video games. Anything but rolling dice.
Like, I don't know how there's any time to consume new material, to get engrossed in anything else, whether it be a book or a TV show or anything. I just feel like all of the time would have to be devoted to planning and or running, and you just I don't know.
Well, I've gotten to a point running so many games so close to each other that I can prepare a session for a game within about 30 minutes.
Okay.
So Matthew Bow wants to know, what's the largest group of the 9 of your 9 games?
Oh, the largest group? My Sunday morning games, that's a Pathfinder. We have 7 players in that.
Also, too, you're playing all your games online, so that helps because you don't have travel time back and forth, which makes it a lot easier. You just pop on the computer.
There's no travel time, but at the same time with the online games, like if you're playing on Roll20, people expect like maps, they expect music. You have to set all of that up ahead of time. It's a little more work, I think, than doing it in person. But that said, I haven't played in person in like 2 years, so...
Now, you also said, you were also talking beforehand a little bit. You're a hired gun, so that's cool. Congrats on living the D&D lifestyle. And the other thing is you had talked about some of your homebrew stuff. So the bulk of the material you're running, is it all homebrew or do you mix it up between established settings and homebrew?
Oh man, the bulk of it is definitely homebrew settings. And when I say homebrew, I exclusively mean settings. I don't homebrew rules often. But yeah, it's I find it easier to do homebrewed settings than the pre-published ones. And I run a few pre-published adventures throughout the week, and those are actually way more difficult to prepare for.
I can understand that. I mean, having done a little bit of, running prepared material versus, running the stuff that is just, thought up on your own or homebrew. Now, you said that you're running these in your own setting. Are all these games in one world, or do you have like a multitude of different settings that you're dealing with?
Well, the majority of the Pathfinder games are done in the same world. And up until recently, my Sunday morning and my Saturday evening groups were running in the same world at the same time. And I messed up a little and may have accidentally set them against each other a while back. That it didn't end well, but it was working for a long time.
So at any point did they actually have to go head to head, or did you just kind of like clone
yes,
one group?
Our last session of that campaign was a 6-hour long. Everyone was together. There were, can't remember if it was 12 or 14. It must have been 12 at the time. And there was supposed to be this big showdown. And of course, one of the players decided he was going to betray the party at that instant.
So, with that, what did all the players have fun? Did they enjoy that style of game?
The style of game in general, yes. Everybody loved it, and we started out doing the same thing for our next campaign, but we've kind of diverted it into 2 different games that just take place in the same world, but they're 5 years apart.
So what I would have done, or thinking about that moment now, it's like, oh, that's an interesting point, and we've had this kind of come up several times, and I didn't think about this thing before, but what if you were to, should this come up again, what if you were to take those 2 groups, okay, at the point of when they meet, you still continue to run session A, session B, what have you, but the other group of players you make as a group of NPCs. You can still run group A session by itself, see how that encounter goes. Look at session B, run that encounter with the other group as your NPCs. And that for some reason at that moment the world is fractured and there's now 2 parallel dimensions. You can keep running the story, as the only thing that's changed is the outcome of that encounter. And if one player decides he's going to betray, he could bounce into the other game. Just ideas that popped into my head. So.
Yeah, I wish I had thought of something like that at the time. I have gotten better since then, but with that campaign, for the longest time, it was with 2 GMs instead of 1, and we were running it literally the same time.
Okay.
So, part of the fun was that if one of the players in a group needed to go get something from the other group, we could just have him hop in. We had these portals that acted as Deus Ex Machina everywhere.
Okay.
So we had interchangeable party composition. It was really fun.
So Vexlight wants to know, how do you prep in 30 minutes? What does that look like for someone who wants to learn how to speed prep?
Well, that is not something that can be taught. It's basically you need to know your group. You need to really know what kind of campaign this is. If it's a simple concept like just going up against the undead, surprise, there's an undead in this town. But if it's something more complicated, like a political intrigue or anything along those lines, then write fast. That's what I can tell you. Most of the 30 minutes is devoted to making maps, so I can produce a story very quickly.
I think if you're doing an ongoing story with ongoing players, the further into the material you get, the further into the campaign. Personally, I think it's pretty easy to have an idea of what the players are going to do. You also have the ability to reach out in between sessions and say, "Hey, what are you guys looking to do next time?" and have some inkling from them what they're looking for out of the next game based off of what's happening in the story or character goals. That's going to feed some possible insight into what you can do. I don't hand draw maps anymore. There's plenty of free map software out there. I go grab some, print, voila. And a lot of times I'll randomize a couple of different times until I see something that I like, and then I can modify on the spot based on how big or how small the map is. Oh, I want to add an extra room here, or I want to take away this chunk and I'll fill that in with, this is a collapsed tunnel, and see what they do with it. Sometimes they'll want to move the boulders and see what's back there. Sometimes they'll investigate like, oh, was this planned? Is this hidden? Is there really something valuable back there? So you can do a lot of that stuff that shaves down, prep time. Dave and I, we tend to, we film videos Saturday afternoon. We got, 2 hours or less in between the last video being filmed and when the players show up for our home games. And that's usually when we, are sitting there having conversations and people are showing up and we're still like, okay, what are we actually doing tonight? So we kind of do a bit of the same thing.
I definitely did not have 2 hours this past weekend.
No, you had about 45 minutes, if not less.
Yeah. So there's actually two of your players are in the chat, and they're both giving you very high praises as a GM. Are you open to doing any more games, or are you at capacity?
I can run. I've tested this. I can run up to 14 and be fine. Anything over that, I can only do it for like a month before I just have to cancel everything and go die out in the desert somewhere.
Well, we don't want that.
Now, I want to bring this up. I know like this wasn't the topic of the chat, but because it is what you're doing, you're getting praise in the chat, and some people have trouble looking for finding a game. We get that all the time, and your rates are super reasonable. So, you GM for pay over on one of the virtual tabletops, I imagine. And, apparently you're not having any problem filling your spaces and people seem to be happy. Like I said, there's like 2 or 3 people in the chat that are praising your GMing. So, how would people reach out to you?
Honestly, I don't advertise. Most people find me by word of mouth. So most people find me on Reddit. Just Stitch the Alchemist over there. DM me. I'm on Discord. Also Stitch the Alchemist. I don't change it much.
Yeah, there's definitely at least I don't know if that's a 3rd or 4th person that's popped up now.
I have a lot of players.
That's true.
with what, nine games, if you average that out to 4 per.
Well,
you said one of them has got 7. So
to be fair, a lot of the games are like this core group of people.
Mm-hmm.
I have one guy who's buying 3 games from me right now. Another that does 2.
Nice.
Yeah.
Repeat customers is always a good thing.
Yeah, and it's weird for me now because they've kind of become my friends after, a year and a half of gaming. But business is business.
Absolutely.
Well, anyone who works in a very personal space like that that's going to develop. That happens. And and it does feel a little weird because it's like almost like your friendship is transactional. But that's not really the case. I worked as a personal trainer for 5 years. Ted has done work as a masseuse, so it's the same. So it's the same thing where you deal with people on a very personal, intimate level, and there is a little bit of oddness to it. But at the same time, you still have to pay your bills, you still have to eat, and for the most part, most of those people, as they come to know you and like you, they wouldn't really have it any other way. I've actually had clients move from paying me through a company to privately, because they, it helped them out for what they needed, and they wanted to see me get a bigger chunk of the pie.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really nice. I will say that much. It feels really good to be able to do this as my full-time job. It feels great to be my own boss, to be just working in my hobby. It feels great.
So you mentioned that you're playing Pathfinder. How many different rule sets are you using for these 9 games?
Okay, so at the moment, I'm running Pathfinder, Starfinder, D20 Modern, and I just picked up a group for Vampire the Masquerade.
All right, so now those are very different rule sets. Now, is D20 Modern, is that 3.5?
It's 3. It's not even 3.5 yet.
Okay,
it's pretty interesting.
All right, so you've got Third, you've got Pathfinder, Starfinder. These all have some amalgamations of similarity, and then Vampire, which is just its complete and utter own direction.
Yeah, Vampire is insane. I do have to run 5 from time to time.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of 5th edition. As you can tell from my list there, I prefer crunchier games.
Hey, to each their own.
So it's so weird for me when I have to do 5, because it's a system where very much like I can't just look up a rule for something. I might have to come up with it on the fly, and I always forget advantage and disadvantage when I'm running it. I'm like, where are the modifiers?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because Open Legend is another game that is very rules light. And when I ran it, I'd be like, what is the rule for the... Oh, there isn't. So you just have to make it up.
Yeah, well, that was my thoughts when I was running... up until recently, I was running the Dresden Files RPG, which is powered by Fate. And Fate has basically no rules.
Grab the books.
Oh, yeah. I've got the 3 big ones.
Yeah, I got all 4 for Christmas. So
lucky you.
Please let me know if you are ever going to do another one of those campaigns. As anyone who's familiar with our channels know, my love of Dresden Files. I want to play Dresden Files Fate, but yeah, you can see him back there. And I don't know enough of Fate. And I want to be a player in that game, not just run it. Because I did run a Dresden Files game years ago when the book first came out, but I didn't know that system. So I ran it in Mutants and Masterminds. So please reach out to me if that ever happens again.
I'd be more than happy. I know that my Dresden Files group was very sad to see the campaign end.
Mm-hmm.
It got really crazy towards the end there. I broke my own rules and I started bringing in all the characters from the series.
Oh.
Yeah, never do that.
I did it once, and it was like a cameo. He didn't stay.
Real quickly here, I want to thank Mike Francis Jr. for the $2 super chat, and Thanks. Back at you. So that's awesome. Greatly appreciate it.
And somehow my goblin light disappeared.
Oh, yeah, you're not green anymore.
I don't appear green. I don't know what happened.
Can we fix that? So, Uncle Peter wants to know, what was the longest break you took from gaming in the past year?
In the past year, there was none. You know what? No, that's not entirely true. I took a week vacation. I went back to Illinois to visit with some friends.
Yeah, breaks are for the weak.
Oh man, what is sleep? What are breaks? Like,
So your break is Thursdays.
my break is Thursdays, but at the same time, all of my games are on Discord, and my players are constantly asking me questions.
But do you take Thursdays that you remove yourself from that as well?
No, I'd like to say I do, but no, I can't resist. But it is really nice though, because that core group of gamers I was mentioning, these guys contribute so much to our world building. They contribute so much to the lore of everything that goes down, and they're really great people to game with, honestly.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the next question?
Sorry, it's already been done. Well, thank you, Kenyatta. There was something in the chat that needed attention, but I believe it was thoroughly handled. So, of the 9 games you're running, do you have any favorites? Actually, never mind. I won't ask you that here live.
No, that's fine. I live for arguing systems.
Not games per se, like groups. Like I absolutely have a favorite group. Just the dynamic works the best.
Well,
and
I wouldn't say I have a favorite group, and I'm totally not just saying that because they're all in the chat right now.
How about some favorite moments from your games? With running that many games, you must have a few.
Okay, some favorite moments. There are some things I can't talk about, but very recently there was a moment in my Saturday early morning game where everything just 180'd and we went completely evil.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. So that was a blast. There was my players accidentally encountering a 1,000-year vampire that was asleep in his coffin. There's no way they would have been able to kill him. So they pooled all of their magical resources together. They filled his coffin with water while he was asleep and blessed it and held the lid down as best they could. So that was great.
There is 3 really good questions right in succession here.
All right, bring it.
Andrew wants to know what your rates are. Brian Smith wants to know if you have a DM business card. Is there such a thing?
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, my rates are $40 to be split amongst the group for a 3 or 4 hour session. Anything after that is going to be an additional $15 an hour. But again, that's split amongst the players. Most of the other paid GMs I've talked to tend to do like 10 to 20 per person per hour. And no offense to any of them, but I find that kind of unreasonable for what you're getting out of it.
I can't take my family to the movies for under $100 for the night. I'm just saying.
And as for business cards, no, that would imply that I leave my house to hand them out to people.
Just drive around throwing them out. There was another really good question. Mr. X, do your games tie together thematically? As you mentioned, it sometimes they do. Or do you have 9 completely different storylines going in your head at once?
The latter of those. So, like I said, a couple are pre-published adventures, and while those are more difficult for me to set up, they are so relaxing. Like, I don't have to think of anything. It's right there. But it's so much more rewarding to me to just pull the game right out of my head. But yeah, it's all separate. Even the games that take place in the same world have very different themes and concepts going on behind them.
Is your stuff streamed, or is it like once it's out there, it's gone?
No, I don't stream. My players can attest to this. I tend to break technology by being in its vicinity.
Oh. But so, yet you can run 9 games a week.
You know what? It's a miracle. A lot of the time, though, and I warn people about this ahead of time, but I live in a desert with terrible internet access. So we use Discord for voice and Roll20 for games. So sometimes if I'm in Roll20 and Discord at the same time, it stops coming through.
Oh wow.
Or, or my internet just cuts out for no reason whatsoever because sand.
Wow.
So, Kyle Ellis has a question. Since you homebrew settings, what is your favorite homebrew setting you made, and what makes it stand out to you?
Well, I only have the one homebrew setting, but I have players in the chat, help me out here. What are we up to? Like 35 different games for it.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I keep coming up with campaign ideas. I can't stop. But our setting is called Realms of Evermore, and it's got the traditional big evil empire right in the middle of it. And it's very fun for me because it's special to me because it's the first time I ever wrote a unique campaign setting years ago, and we just stuck with it, and it was really nice to see it grow and evolve over time. Before I was running 9 games a week, every Wednesday, my players and I would take time out of our schedules to work on the world a little bit.
So, obviously, then that means you're recording that stuff somewhere. You have any plans to do anything with it?
I played around with publishing it at some point, but I am horrendously unorganized.
That was going to be one of my next questions. Is do you use any tools? Do you have any tips or advice for organizing your games?
Yeah, I've got some advice. It's find an unpaid intern and get them to write down notes for all your games for you. So that's what I do. I have a player who has so graciously volunteered his time, and he sits in games that even he's not playing in, and he takes these meticulously detailed notes, and it's amazing.
So you just need a chronicler, preferably one that volunteers.
Yeah, preferably one that volunteers, yes.
Ian wants to know if you work with any other paid GMs.
No. I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but at the end of the day, you're just making something that doesn't need to be that complicated more complicated. At least in my opinion. I don't work well with others in a business setting.
So how did you get set up with something like this?
Well, so I used to hang out at my local game store before I moved out here, and apparently there were stories being told about my games without my knowledge, which first of all made me feel so flattered. But then, but some guys approached me later, having heard the stories of my game after I had moved, wanting to see if I would run a game online for them. And I said, I can't, I'm working. They said, well, we'll pay you. Yeah, you know what? No, that's fair. I'll do it. From there, just word of mouth, man. Like, I do not advertise. People just show up.
You know what they say? Money talks, bullshit walks. So, and this is all you're doing right now. You just run games.
Yeah, this is what I do full time. It's stressful, but nice.
So how long from, hey, we'll pay you, that first instance, to, well, I'm going to quit my job because I can make this work?
Well, it was about 5-6 months ago, and I was just flipping burgers at the time. I didn't know.
Not being paid, just, flipping a burger.
Yeah, just as a hobby. Just as a hobby. No, but I was at my job, and I had 2 paid games at the time, only 2, and some players offered me a 3rd. And I thought, well, I'll be making a hell of a lot less, but anything's got to be better than this. And then from there, suddenly I had free time, and people that wanted games could get them, and I just blew up.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was all luck, man. 100% luck. There was absolutely no skill or planning involved in this.
Well, I wouldn't say no skill. I mean, clearly, if this many people are willing to pay you to do this, then there is certainly skill behind it.
Well, there's no skill. I just happen to be the best at what I do.
Oh,
and
modest.
And what he does isn't nice. No. Matthew Bow has a question for you, Ted.
Okay. What's the question?
Maybe I'm way behind here, but do you own or run a game store? Is that how you guys started Nerdarchy, or do you just happen to own the ultimate nerd collection behind you?
I'm obsessed with things, so I'm always, buying stuff, and that's how you wind up with all these books, all these minis, all these things.
He never gets rid of stuff.
I never get rid of stuff. No, I never owned a gaming store. I just impulse buy all kinds of stuff all over the place. And I've been buying nerd stuff since, I don't know, since I got interested in it when I was a kid.
I can attest it's a family trait. He comes from a long line of hoarders.
Well, I'm working on that.
You're working on becoming a hoarder?
Well, yeah, I might have a small spending problem when it comes to game books. Just a little bit.
I tend to stick with something, and if I like a rule set, I'm gonna get everything that's out there. And I'm obsessed with dice and minis, so I will never have enough.
We have Cardboard Fortress weighing in. Ted is a cargo cultist.
He's been here before, so I mean he knows what the stuff looks like. So
and in all fairness, Ted doesn't just stick to one thing. Like his obsession is far-reaching to all tabletop games, RPG or not. Hunks of plastic is a love of his. It's his kryptonite, really.
I'm not gonna argue. Dave's known me a long time.
He's acquired so many of my books over the years because I amass stuff and go, ugh, I haven't touched this in over 6 months. It must go somewhere else, and I get rid of it. And then at some point I'll be like, I want that thing again, and I'll go buy it again.
Well, you've got that huge collection that we can see back there of the 4th edition books.
Yeah, I have not purged in
Wow.
several years now, so I've kind of gotten over that, and I'm probably going to eventually build my own nerd nook. Now I feel like it should happen since we do this Nerdarchy thing anyway. And even actually on some of those shelves, I got stuff over there as well.
Yeah, 4th edition. I put my foot down and said, I'm at a point I can't be buying all of this stuff. So Dave actually bit the bullet on that and bought all the stuff. I only got, I think, the core set, and that was much later. I had the player's handbook, and I'm like, that's enough for now.
For me, my obsessions are more specialized anyway. Like I'm just more into tabletop RPGs, and I kind of stay there. As far as books that like I read for enjoyment, it's like I read it and I'm done with it. It's very rare that I'll ever read a book more than once. So I'm like, this doesn't really need to be in my life anymore.
Whereas my family, because my wife and my son and I, we will go back to a book or a novel and go back into it multiple times. And some of the stuff we've then have been able to turn around and say, well, now we're going to read to the kids. So my wife and I have each read Harry Potter a couple of times, and then we've read it to our son, who he's then gone and read it. So each of those 7 books have been read at least 4 or 5 times. And that's if my wife's not going back to it again and again, because she absolutely is I need something to read, and whatever toots my fancy now is what I'm going to reread.
John Baird could not be mistaken more. A wife and a couple of credit cards will put your financial priorities in check. Ted's wife is also a hoarder, so it actually compounds it.
in her defense, at the moment, she is actually pulled away from some of that. She does have her nail polish. You could call it a shrine or alcove or whatever it is, but she's confined. And for years, in between her Barbie obsession and nail polish, she wasn't getting anything. So I never stopped plastic. So
Mr. X wants to know, have you ever considered assembling an all-star group of charismatic players and monetizing a stream to rival the greats? Well, You had mentioned an issue with technology, so that would be a
Yeah.
problem.
Well, first of all, I don't know how streams work.
Neither do we.
Secondly, every time I've tried, it's ended poorly. And third, I don't think it would be fair of me to monetize a stream with players that I'm not sharing that with. That's just me.
Well, I mean, if they're aware of it going into it, that this is part of the contract, they're paying you to do this because of your elite status. Maybe they've got a discounted, rate for that particular game or whatever contract that you set forth.
Yeah.
Technology issues aside, of course.
Also, it's not that easy. Like, I'm going to do a stream game and stream games and make money. That is unless you're doing it, Mr. X. I don't know what to tell you because it really isn't that simple. There's a whole lot more work that goes into it. There's a lot of hours that goes into just marketing and advertising that stream. If you're doing layouts and character art and stuff like that, to really get a high end production, you would have to increase your work output by a lot for that one game. So there's a lot of pros and cons to doing something like that.
As it is, I honestly don't think I have time to work a stream into everything else, especially since I would then have to learn how it works.
Hey, you got Thursday.
Why not, man? Like, no. My Thursdays are special. Don't touch my Thursdays.
I'm messing with you, dude.
So Vexlight, question on homebrew settings: is it worth making homebrew races for those settings, or is it okay just pull from defaults? AKA, what's the pros and cons for each?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, homebrewed races and classes are garbage that don't need to be touched. That's a gross exaggeration. Please don't yell at me. I don't like using them, but again, it's kind of different in 5, but part of the reason I love Pathfinder so much is just the insane amount of character options you have. So we haven't really needed to incorporate new stuff. Especially since there's a new thing released like every week, all the time. I can't even keep up with it.
So Andrew wants to know, how is it you manage 14 different games per week? What's the average day look like?
The average day when I was doing 14 was wake up, drink coffee, run game, drink coffee, rinse and repeat. Twice per day. Mostly, there's a couple hours between games. There's you have to take your half hour before and prepare. And then at night, just after everything's done, just taking an hour to unwind and not think about it. And then, just pass out from exhaustion.
And I can say too, and I'm sure Ted can attest to this as well, from being people that work on computers a lot now, like at a certain point, you just need to walk away and not be in front of a screen or a monitor.
That's why I like reading so much. I can pretend not to hear the notifications.
Give me a blank wall to stare at, please.
So what do you do for typical session arcs? Like, do you do like short, medium, long?
Oh man, it varies so much game to game.
But is that set up with the players?
Kind of. It kind of grows organically with depending on how we've been playing, what kind of stories we're pursuing here. I think for the most part, I start out with the very long stretch arcs. But over time, it usually shortens itself, and then most of them will stay somewhere between the two extremes.
So, what are you looking at as numbers? Like 20 sessions, a year?
Well, for the most part, I'd say that the average is about 10 to 20 sessions for the more average ones. And then the longer ones, we took about, I really want to say we took like 6 months to get one thing done.
Okay. only reason I ask is, we have a friend used to appear on videos, and he was like, I believe in the 357. You shouldn't have sessions that ever go, or campaigns that ever go beyond that, because people are going to move, people are going to get new jobs, and it's hard to keep schedules going. And like, I've been running my game, pretty much since the inception of 5th edition. Before we even had the monster manual, I was running, or maybe it was when we just got the monster manual, is when I was running my 5th edition game. I think we're somewhere on like session 38. And while the players have somewhat mutated and twisted, from what we had initially, the game is still going strong, and we're going to get to that conclusion of going all the way to 20th level.
Yeah, it's really strange playing with mutants at the table. John Baird, do you gentlemen enjoy introducing Lovecraftian horror into your games, or from time to time use one of his stories as a framework for a dungeon?
Are we playing Call of Cthulhu?
That would be a good question, but I have, like, my Other Skies game was something that we ran in Open Legend, and we threw it to the patrons to pick the genre, and there was a list, and there was like a 3-way tie between Eldritch Horror, Steampunk, and Fantasy. So I was like, instead of like picking one or the other, I just mashed them together.
Excellent choice.
I'm always leery about doing horror, because
D&D players suck at it.
Yeah, like you have to have a certain rule set to be able to handle the, oh my god, this thing is so horrific that I can't fathom it. And typical fantasy games, that's not in there. It's like, there's the frightened condition. Like, that doesn't cover what these things can do.
Or you need player buy-in.
Exactly. And that is probably the single most important part of any of my games. I do run a horror game on Saturday mornings my time, so at 2 a.m., because I hate myself. And at the beginning, they were voting on what they wanted to do, and they selected this horror campaign I had written. And we are having an absolute blast with it. But horror really does only work if the players agree to be scared, if that makes any sense to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone wants to play D&D as a monster killer. You cannot play horror that way, because one of two things happens. You shred characters left and right because you have to use things that are truly horrifying, or they just kill all the monsters and there's nothing scary about the game at all.
Right. And alternatively, you could always just run a horror system. It doesn't need to be D&D.
Right.
Like, I think that too many people, and people ask me all the time, can you run Call of Cthulhu but in D&D? Can you run a Western but in D&D? Can you run Snakes on a Plane but in D&D? Like, sure. But alternatively, have you heard of these systems that already do that?
Yeah, we've been known to say that ourselves. Can you play Star Wars with D&D? Sure, but there's like 7 different Star Wars games out there that will do it so much better. Like, D&D is its own thing, and it's really good at doing D&D.
Right.
Now, some people have stretched it, and they've used it for other things, and they've modified it, and it takes a lot of work, and I'm just lazy. I'd be like, I'd rather play one of these other systems that already does that.
Yeah, right. Give me a generic system, or give me a system that was meant to do that. That said, my preferred game is D&D clones. Like, I love the whole fantasy RPG. Unlike some people, I happen to love having a 5% chance of success or failure. It's great. I love rolling a D20 and seeing what happens.
There's nothing wrong with that. So Brett Brown wants to know, what is the strangest character you have created? But I'll take it a step further and say seen in your games, because you've seen a lot of characters.
Okay. Let me think. The strangest character I've ever played was a kobold who had convinced himself he was a knight. And then the strangest character I'd ever seen across games that I've run, I'm going to have to say this guy, and I still remember the character's name. It was William Farcrow, and all he did was run around screaming his own name and beating things to death with other things in a very heavy magic, heavy gods setting. His character did the whole, I don't believe in magic, I don't believe in gods, I don't believe in dragons. And I was so ready to kick this guy out of the group immediately. But yeah, it turns out it was a blast. It was so much fun having him around. We kind of needed that comic relief at some point.
So that I guess that comes up where sometimes some people are just too disruptive, and whether they're paying for the game or not, at a certain point it detracts, and you have to get rid of someone. Has that come up often or that much since you've been doing it?
Thank God, no. I have had bad players, sure, but I have, after I started really getting into gaming, there was like a 3-week or a 3-year time when I was like in high school playing games. Worst group I've ever played with. But once I started playing with adults who just wanted to play the game, it turned out that, yes, you can have a group of entirely good players at your table. Who would have thunk it? I have had to kick people out before games have started. One guy, for a free game I was running, was complaining that he wasn't going to get to play more than twice a month after having been explained that, hey, this is what I do for a living. I can't be doing, constantly unpaid games, and I'm more than happy to help you out. But so that didn't work out. And then we were gaming with a 65-year-old grandmother. And she was the nicest lady I have ever talked to. But after so many months, she just couldn't learn the game, and I felt really bad about it. But for the sake of everyone else,
grandma out of the game?
I kicked a grandmother out of the game.
Oh my God, you're going to burn it out. If there's a hell, you're burning in it. The special place with child molesters and people that talk in the theater.
Okay, people that talk in the theater aren't welcome at my games either.
Well, that's reasonable. Joshua Smith wants to know, what is some general advice you would offer to someone considering offering paid DMing? Anything you point out that was an unexpected challenge?
Okay, my honest advice is don't do it. Okay, I know it worked out for me. It works out for some people.
And besides, you'll be competition for him.
Hey, well, yeah. So take this with a grain of salt, but it's not sustainable, man. I don't expect to be doing this more than a couple of years at most. You're relying on other people enjoying what you write, what you do. It is a whole different ballgame to run a game for money than it is for fun. And granted, you can still have fun doing it, but suddenly everything is a deadline. Everything is stress. If you want to miss a game because you're feeling out of it, you can't. They've paid you for that game. You have to make everything the best you can possibly be. But as for unexpected, honestly, I'd say the amount of me not knowing the rules that people are willing to put up with after they've paid me. I've played Pathfinder for years. I still don't know anything. The vampire one, I'd never run vampire before, and I let them know that ahead of time. We still had a blast. But
I find when you can run almost any system. First of all, RPGs it's really about being a good bullshit artist, right?
Yeah.
So if you just focus on the elements of the game you do know and you're good at, most of the time players won't even know. There might be like an oddball or whatever, and hopefully you can actually channel the rules lawyer in that group, or the person that knows the rules the most, to actually assist you when it comes to that stuff, where you can be just like, hey, John, what's the rule? What does the rule book say on this?
Right, and that's exactly what I do. I have a guy who just happens to know more than I do, and I introduced him to the game way after I started playing, and somehow just hey, that's not how that works. Okay, thanks, man. I'll keep that in mind.
As long as you have someone that's not an a-hole about it, and if you're honest, of hey, especially in Pathfinder, like you could stack all the books up and hide behind them. So there's so many rules.
Yeah.
The likelihood that all the rules isn't very good unless you have some kind of etiquette memory, which I don't. Like, I read something, forget about it right away.
Right. Well, that said, I think that if you're going to be playing a crunchy game like Pathfinder or 3.5 or anything like that, you do kind of have a responsibility to your players, and players, you need to do the same thing, but learn how the damn book works. Like, just a little bit, please. Like, I do not want, and I've had this happen, I do not want to come back 2 years later to a game we have been playing for 2 years and have someone continue to ask me, okay, I've rolled the D20. What do I add to it to hit with a sword? Like, man, every session, every time.
Ouch.
Well, different people learn at different rates and, reasons, stuff, things. But I definitely get that, at that point, it's like you need to make up a cheat sheet or something, or have every single thing you could possibly do written out, or you're just detracting from the table. So John Barrett has an interesting question. Are any of you gentlemen 420 friendly? Would you prefer your players not smoke weed at the table? Well, at my table, they cannot smoke weed because it's freaking illegal in the state that I live in. I consider myself a law-abiding citizen for the most part.
At the actual in-person game, it's my home. I have children. As Dave says, it's against the law. So at my personal table, it's a no. What you do in the sanctity of your own house while we're gaming online, I can't stop you. But if you're going to be inhaling, exhaling, what have you, mute your mic so that you're not doing the...
I know Doug may be listening. I don't know, but he's as annoying as hell sometimes with his vaping when we're on stream. He doesn't do it while we're live. He does it, when we're just talking. But it's like like a dragon in the room with you.
I love you, Doug.
So it is legal in my state, but I personally don't. And if it were an in-person table, then no, not in my house. Mm-hmm. But if go outside, please. But if we're online, I have people ask me that too during session 0. Like, hey, do you care if I smoke weed while we're playing? I'm like, I don't care as long as you're not blowing into the microphone. Like, I don't care what you do while you're paying me to have fun, man. I've been known to enjoy a drink while I'm gaming. Why? I don't care.
Yeah, and I guess to that, we have had alcohol at the table, but it doesn't happen very often.
Mm-hmm. Well, the key is to not have more than one.
More than one has definitely happened at the table.
Definitely,
but, yeah. But it has been in celebration of something, and again, since we usually game at my house, I'm always making sure that, all right, what are you doing to make sure that you're safe to drive? And there's been a couple of times where it's been a little close, and it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Garbo Fortress. I've played with a vapor once. Take that crap outside. It's still smoking. Even if you're sucking on a lightsaber. Hey man, there's only 6 known carcinogens. Is what I like to point out to people. I compare to the hundreds and cigarettes, but there's things you probably don't even know. It's going to give you some kind of other different cancer. I feel like living gives you cancer nowadays.
Yeah.
Well,
let's see. Alina Adine has a good question. How do you screen prospective players and gauge what sort of campaign to run? Do you have a menu to choose from?
Yeah.
I want a menu like McDonald's.
Value
game number 6, please.
I do like to joke that I'm kind of like the McDonald's of gaming, in that I'm comparatively, I'm decently cheap. I'm probably not the best, but I do have a large and extensive dollar menu for you to choose from if you'd like.
Do you charge different amounts for different games?
Oh, no. I even tell people I'm willing to learn a new system for you as long as you are willing to buy me the rule book. I'm more than happy to. The only time I have ever said I would charge more for a system is a game that I'm not even going to bring up here. Because it infuriates me so much.
Jacob H is in the chat, and I believe he's another one of yours. Most of our players came from Play by Post role playing subreddit. Elena, for campaigns, he puts up a poll that lists all of our options once we wrap up a campaign, at least for his 2 main games. So
yeah, that's my guy that writes all the stuff for me.
Your chronicler.
He can't stop. He can't help himself.
The unpaid intern.
Exactly. Sometimes I feed him though.
Is he local to you, or do you send pizza deliveries to his house?
No. I slide him a couple bucks every now and then to help me out. So we like to joke that I'm feeding him every once in a while. But yeah, he helps out. But yeah, exactly what he said. The core group was gotten from a Game of Thrones inspired play-by-post, and from there it's just essentially anytime I'm on Reddit and I mention paid GMing anywhere, I get a flood of people asking me for games.
How much hate do you get? Because like the hobby is a little odd that way. They're very concerned about what you're doing. It's
gotten better. It has gotten better. When I first started, I wouldn't tell anybody that I didn't know already wanted one because, you'd get... I've gotten, like, actual death threats from people, but that's, like, super extreme examples, only once or twice.
Dear Lord.
Yeah, well... But my favorite thing to say when people go, oh, all GMing should be free, you should be offering these games anyway. So I say, okay, why don't you run it then? Why don't you offer 9 games per week out of your free time to give to people?
And do those people have a response, or do they shut up?
Nope, they never do.
Well, that's because a lot of people like to bitch and moan and cry about what other people are doing. It's real simple. Like when you're a kid and your mom was like, just mind your own business. If the whole world kind of did that, it would just be
so great.
Yeah, things would just run much smoother. If you're not doing anything, you're not hurting yourself, and I only mildly care about that, or hurting anyone else, then it's your life. Live it the way you want. Yeah,
man.
I'm kind of live and let live kind of guy. So
I agree with that statement, but I also agree with if people are willing to pay you for it, what is the problem? I don't understand the mindset of if there are people who are willing to pay because they don't know anyone who's going to run, they don't have access to a quality GM, whatever have you, and they're like, look, this is worth my hard-earned dollars to get somebody of quality and for lack of a better word, a contract to keep going, because you did say, like, I've been paid, I'm going to do it regardless. Like that gets a guaranteed slot,
Right. And that's exactly why people do it. People just simply do not have time, or they have just lost a very bad GM, or their best GM ever can't do it anymore and nobody wants to pick up the slack. And there's always people that I get all the time, people that are new to the hobby and don't know where to begin. But yeah, what you were saying though, people sometimes act like I'm pulling a gun on people and saying, all right, now give me your money and I will roll dice for you.
Yeah, give me your money and we'll play games.
Let's see, Fantasy Ground College, they actually had a question. Do you offer training for your games? Like us aggressive FGC alumni. Fantasy Grounds, another virtual tabletop, I'm sure you know about it. Well, they have this other organization that is not connected to them really in any way, shape, form, other than they're fans of it, and they like to aggressively help people learn that VTT.
I used to teach a GMing class once a week for 5th. But once my games started picking up, I kind of dropped that. Also lack of interest at some point. And I've taught several of my players how to use Roll20. I'm sorry, Fantasy Grounds guys. That's my platform of choice. But you know, as long as people are playing the game, right?
That's it, exactly. Let's see. Actually, so this is kind of interesting. Mr. X, there is a stigma to charging DMing. I've played with paid DMs who freaking suck. Now you hope they can't sustain it, but still there is often a risk that's throwing your money away. And that goes with like anything in life that you spend money on. Like, you don't know if you're going to get a good service. And like, you said, Stitch, you don't advertise. So, clearly people are by word of mouth promoting you as a good GM. We've been on this live chat for about an hour now, and we've had like 3 or 4 people of your people show up to say what a good GM you are. So, it's like anything in life. Hopefully there's a way for you to do your due diligence. But if you just totally choose not to, and then you hand somebody money for something and the service that you get isn't very good, it's on you and them equally, because you didn't really look into it.
Well, there's a couple different sides of this coin. Anytime that there is money for service, you can do all the due diligence in the world and research something, and this one time that might suck. Now, it's then between the person who provided the service and the person who paid for it to discuss a way to rectify the situation. If you, as the person who paid, if you don't speak up, and to that person, they don't have the ability to fix the issue. And if you do speak up and they say, well, you know what, I'm sorry, this time wasn't as good, but they're not willing to do anything to earn back your trust, well, then the reputation's been damaged irrevocably. Do you have anything that this kind of situation's ever happened, Stitch?
Well, I can honestly say I've never had anyone dissatisfied with my services, but I was saying earlier that this isn't for everyone to do. And I said a couple of times now that it is a totally different ball game. People have way higher expectations of you. And for some reason, everyone that's okay with it thinks that they can run a game and that they're God's gift to gaming. Like, it's... And I'm not trying to put down anybody who wants to do what I do. It's just, it's not easy. And I've never had bad players, but from our perspective on the paid GMs, if I have a bad player who's a customer, I can't afford to tell them to knock it off. But if someone has a problem with me, I would really hope that they could come forward and talk to me about it so I could fix it. Those Vampire the Masquerade players I was telling you guys about, they called me to let me know everything I did right and everything that I did wrong and what they were expecting for next time, but that they absolutely had a blast and that they would love to play again. So,
I wouldn't, real quick, I just want to let you know, be wary of any white panel vans that show up outside your house. Or any kind of other, they might use a helicopter or something. I prefer a white panel van. But Stitch thinks he's only be doing this for a year. He doesn't realize that we've got him locked in.
Oh man, well, you know what, man? If you want to keep doing it, man, I'm more than happy.
So like I said, apparently people are very happy with what you're doing. Fantasy Grounds College has a really good question. Do you think that charging helps narrow down flaky players from not showing up for a session?
You know what? That's
no,
probably...
I can answer this, right? Sorry to cut you off. You can answer it, but let me tell you. As
it.
Someone who's provided services before, people actually feel less guilty about not showing up when they pay for it. They either want it or they don't, right? But if they don't show up, they don't feel guilty because they paid you for it, and it's like almost like hush money. But what's been your experience?
I have had kind of not that problem. I have found that paid players tend to show up far more often, and I like to equate it to like if somebody crashes their car, they're much more likely to pay to get the car repaired than buy a new one. Like if one of the reasons people pay is because then the rest of the group is by extension much more likely to show up, because usually I have one person per group that covers the cost of everything. That tends to be how people find me. So the rest of the group feels really bad if they don't show up.
Yeah, and you know that kind of speaks to what I was saying a little bit, because the obligation is they feel obligated if one
Right.
person is paying for it and it's not them. But but I find when you do offer a service that people are personally paying for, especially especially people that are better off and the money doesn't matter to them as much, they're like, whatever. They just shrug their shoulders and move on. Because we used to charge, if you gave a late cancel for a personal training session, you got charged for it, so that the trainer still got paid or whatever.
I mean, that's only fair, but I do have some very generous policies here, which is part of the reason why this is totally unsustainable. But
you're not going to become a GM mogul.
I thought about it. Like, I honestly thought about bringing some other paids under my wing and being like, this is my model. This is how I do it. Let's get out there and make me money. But then I thought, wow, that sounds like work.
Well, then also, it would very much become like personal trainers, hairdressers, stuff like that. Eventually, they'll just branch out on their own and do it on their own anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just creating competition at that point.
Chrissy has a question. This may have been answered before, but what about one-shots for celebrations like birthdays or bachelor parties, etc.? Have you ever been paid for these kind of gigs?
Yep. That's all there is to it. Just, I do one-shots.
Same rates?
Same rates. Just if they want a longer one, then it's obviously going to be more. But 3 to 4 hours, hit me up.
Has anyone ever asked you about like, hey, can I pay more to have this special thing happen in a game? Like, do they tailor different events or different magic items or any of that kind of stuff?
Nope. Well, okay. I've had questions like this all the time, but no. If everyone is paying for it, then there's no way in hell that I'm going to let you give me extra money to say, like, oh, you're some magical son of a king somewhere, and that's the new thing. But if it's one person doing it and they want to give me extra to add something to the game, that doesn't directly make them any more powerful than the other players or give them some kind of advantage, then by all means, I'm not going to say no to free money.
So, Fantasy Grounds, do you provide an exit questionnaire to players after a session to help improve?
I keep meaning to do that, but no. I ask them, how did you guys like it? And if I've introduced something new, I'll say, did you like this? And then I usually forget about it and go back to what I was doing anyway.
So Vincent says, usually there's a questionnaire after every few sessions just
No,
to
there
keep
isn't.
our ideas and concerns close at hand.
Vince, why are you lying? That happens like once every 30 to 40 sessions, man. Like,
maybe he's slipping. Maybe he's taking his Chronicle job to the next level, and he's.
That's not even the chronicler. That's just the guy who insists that I should be charging more.
Oh. Do you ever put Toasty McWaffles? Do you ever put a deck of many things in your games? I have when I was younger. Never again.
Yep. Nope. No. I used to play with the Grog of Substantial Whimsy. If anybody knows what that is. No, I do not play with random effect buttons anymore. Not after the time the bear's head exploded.
No deck of many things. No wish spell.
Yeah, I do ban wish. That across all of Pathfinder, wish is the one thing that I'm not okay with. And it's not even because of what it normally does. It's because in every single game you get 30 different, but can it do this? But can it do this? Can it do this? So I just say no.
The answer is it cannot. I'm going to dive into one last question and we'll wrap things up because we were past the hour mark for sure. Hakar the Mage, have you ever had a TPK close to the start of a paid session? If so, what do you have prepped to deal with that?
Well, I have not had a TPK. I have had a player no, what is it? Like 3 players die on their first session. 1 guy within the first 10 minutes, so that was nice. The thing is, I don't pull punches, and I roll out in the open. And I warn people about this ahead of time. I ask them if it's okay, and most of the time, people tell me, "Yeah, that's great, go for it." But basically, what do I have prepared for that? A heartfelt apology. Like, here's a blank character sheet. Go nuts.
An infographic that pops up on in Roll20 that says no refunds. And with a dragon giving the middle finger.
So does that character get into that session? If the one who died 10 minutes in?
Oh yeah. If you can make a new character very quickly, and most of my players can because reasons. I'm not a killer GM, I promise. So if you can do it very quickly, if you can get it done before the session is over, which yes, they definitely can, I will work you in there. I will find a way to make you a part of it. But I'm also not going to give somebody a free resurrect for no reason, because that just sets an expectation. And I'm also not going to ask everyone to stop playing so that you can make a new character. I'm sorry.
We've had a TPK on a live stream that was sponsored for
Beautiful.
with several big companies, and it was supposed to go on for another session at least. And I want to say fairly early into the session, maybe the halfway mark, we TPK'd. So, I mean, you're playing it when you're playing a tabletop role-playing game and you're respecting the game for what it is. It happens. It's part of the game, and it wasn't planned. The GM kept kind of trying to warn us that we were heading in a bad direction, but the players were all into their character and be like, nah, we're locked and loaded. This is what we're doing. This bitch has got to die, and and we got her. We killed her. But, ultimately we paid the price for our stubbornness. So, I mean, that's D&D. Well, anyway, Stitch, I want to thank you for coming on. And thank you for sharing some insights into, one, being a paid DM, and two, into running, so many games. I know we kind of drifted, away from a lot of games that you run, more into the paid DMing thing. But I think people are really interested in that. And it really is kind of a symptom of a lot of games that you run is just kind of like a symptom of that anyway, and that's how that kind of comes about. Because otherwise I don't think anyone would run that many games, unless you're independently wealthy. How would you? So that was really cool to get your insights into it. Thanks for popping on with us today, Ted.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for everyone hanging out in the chat. We've been rocking 80, 90 people the whole time, so that's all very cool. But you know the drill, guys. Until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.